Okay, so you know how sometimes someone sends you something and you're like, whoa, this is a lot to process.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's kind of how I felt when I saw this H.R.21, the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. Like, wow, this is a deep dive waiting to happen.
Absolutely, and a timely one, too.
Yeah.
This bill's been making its way through the legislative process.
Right. It landed on the Senate Judiciary Committee's desk back on January 24th of this year, so it's definitely current. And, you know, it's tackling a really sensitive and complex issue, how we care for a child, medically speaking, if they're born alive after an abortion or even an attempted abortion. So, you ready to unpack this?
Let's do it. I think a good place to start, as always, is just understanding the core of this whole thing. Like, what's the driving force behind this bill?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even the title itself, Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, is pretty, I guess you could say, direct.
Very much so. It sort of sets the stage, doesn't it?
It does. And then the bill dives right in with this section called Findings by Congress. And there are a couple of statements in there that really jump out. Congress is saying point blank that if an infant is born alive after an abortion, that infant is a legal person under U.S. law. Full stop. They're entitled to all the legal protections that come with that.
Right. It's laying down a very clear foundation. And to further emphasize that, they go on to say that this infant, regardless of how they were born, has the same claim to legal protection as any other newborn baby.
Or even, you know, anyone seeking medical care, they're making a point of saying, look, their legal standing doesn't change based on the circumstances of their birth.
Exactly. That principle of equal protection is like the bedrock of this bill.
Now, the bill also talks about the constitutional authority that Congress is using to try and make this law. Where are they grounding this in the Constitution?
Well, they actually cite two specific parts of the Constitution. First up is Section 5 of the 14th Amendment. That's the part that gives Congress the power to enforce all the stuff in that amendment, including the guarantee of equal protection under the law. So, by saying a baby born alive after an abortion deserves the same legal protection as anyone else, they're arguing that this bill is them using that enforcement power.
Okay, so that's the equal protection argument. What's the other constitutional basis they mentioned?
The other one is Section 8 of Article 1. Specifically, they point to the necessary and proper clause, which includes the power to regulate commerce. Now, this might seem a bit roundabout, but by invoking this clause, they're suggesting that providing medical care and regulating healthcare professionals can be seen as activities that fall under interstate commerce.
Huh. That's interesting how they're kind of weaving those two constitutional arguments together. But let's get into the nitty-gritty. What does this bill actually require people to do? We see this section, Section 1532A, requirements for healthcare practitioners. What's the deal there?
This is where it gets very specific. Basically, if you're a healthcare practitioner and you're there when a child is born alive after an abortion or an attempted abortion, you have a very clear duty of care. The bill says you have to use the same level of skill, care, and diligence to protect that child's life and health as you would for any other baby born at the same gestational age.
Just to clarify for our listeners, gestational age means the age of the pregnancy, counting from the first day of the woman's last period.
Right. Thanks for clarifying that. And it goes beyond just initial care. The healthcare practitioner also has to make sure that baby is immediately transported to a hospital and admitted. So it's about ensuring ongoing, maybe even specialized medical attention.
Okay, so getting that infant to a hospital for continued care. Now, there's also this mandatory reporting of violations part in this section. Who's required to report and what are they reporting?
So this part is huge. Any healthcare practitioner or any employee working in a hospital, doctor's office, abortion clinic, whoever, if they become aware that someone didn't follow those requirements we just talked about, like if they didn't provide the right care or didn't make sure the baby got to a hospital, they are legally required to report that immediately.
And they're reporting it too.
To a state or federal law enforcement agency.
Mm-hmm.
Or both. It's basically saying, look, if you see something that you think is a violation, you have to say something.
So it's creating this legal obligation to report what they believe is a lack of proper care. And I'm guessing there are some pretty serious consequences if those requirements aren't met, right?
Oh, yeah. Section 1532B spells out the penalties. And they're not messing around. For a general violation like not providing the right care or not getting the baby to the hospital, you're looking at fines, imprisonment for up to 5 years, or both.
Wow, so they're really trying to deter any deviation from that standard of care. And it looks like there's an even more severe penalty for a very specific action.
You're reading my mind. The bill specifically addresses the intentional killing of a child born alive. If someone intentionally does something that leads to the death of that infant, they're facing punishment under Section 1111 of Title 18.
And for context, that section is all about murder.
Exactly. Unlawful killing with malice aforethought. So they're basically saying intentionally causing the death of a baby born alive. That's homicide.
No mincing words there.
Yeah.
Now, there's also this section called bar to prosecution. Who does that protect and from what?
Okay, so this is super important to understand. This part says that the mother of the child in these specific situations can't be prosecuted under this section. Not for violating it, not for conspiring to violate it, not for anything related to this specific law.
Okay, so it's making sure that the mother isn't penalized. The focus is solely on the actions of healthcare practitioners.
Exactly. And then we get into civil remedies. What kind of legal recourse is available here?
Well, Section 1532 dual lays it out. Basically, if a child is born alive and someone violates those requirements in subsection A, the woman who had the abortion or attempted abortion can sue them, and they can sue for appropriate relief.
And appropriate relief in this case can mean a few things. It could be money for physical injuries, for emotional distress, or even statutory damages, which are set at 3 times the cost of the abortion. Plus, there's the possibility of punitive damages on top of that.
So if a healthcare practitioner is found to have violated those requirements, they could be facing some serious financial consequences.
Yeah, you're kidding. And to add to that, the bill also says the court has to award legal fees to the woman if she wins the lawsuit.
But it goes both ways, right?
You got it. If the healthcare practitioner wins and the court decides the woman's lawsuit was frivolous, then she's the one who has to pay the legal fees.
It's trying to find that balance, I guess, making sure people can access the legal system, but also discouraging lawsuits that don't have a solid basis. Now, as with any law, definitions are crucial, and Section 1532 gets into those, starting with abortion itself. How do they define that in the context of this bill?
This is where it gets really specific. They define abortion as using or prescribing any instrument, medicine, drug, anything like that, with the intention of either causing the death of an unborn child when you know the woman is pregnant, or ending the pregnancy when you know the woman is pregnant, unless, this is key, unless you're doing it after the point of viability to try and deliver a live baby and keep that baby healthy, or if the only goal is to remove a fetus that's already dead.
Okay, so the intent behind the medical procedure is super important here.
Absolutely. And they also define attempt, specifically when it comes to an abortion. Basically, they're saying is any action that, based on what the person doing it believes, is a substantial step towards actually performing an abortion.
It's like they're not just looking at the end result, but also the steps taken to get there.
Precisely. And then there's this bit about clerical and chapter heading amendments. What's that all about?
Well, that part is more about housekeeping, really. It's updating the legal code to reflect this new section, 1532.
Like filing paperwork, but for laws.
Pretty much. And it changes some of the chapter headings in Title 18 to be more general. Instead of partial birth abortions, it just says abortions.
Broadening the scope a little.
Exactly. And lastly, the bill includes a note on its legislative history. Just a quick rundown of where it's been so far.
Right. It passed the House of Representatives on January 23rd of this year, and then the Senate got it the next day and sent it straight to the Judiciary Committee. So that's where it stands right now.
Okay, so big picture, this Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. It's really all about setting clear legal requirements for how we care for a baby born alive after an abortion or an attempted abortion. It wants to ensure those infants get the same medical care as any other newborn, and it lays out some pretty hefty penalties for not doing that, or for intentionally ending that child's life.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Right.
And this leads us to something I think is really worth pondering. How do you think those specific definitions in the bill, especially the ones for abortion and attempt, how will those actually play out in real life? How will courts interpret them?
And, think about those mandatory reporting requirements. What impact will that have on healthcare professionals? On the whole dynamic within places where reproductive health care is provided, there are a lot of legal and practical questions here.
Tons. And ones that deserve careful consideration.
Absolutely. Well, folks, that's H.R.21 in a nutshell. We hope this deep dive has given you a good understanding of this proposed law and all the angles it touches on. Thanks for joining us as we try to make sense of it all.
Thanks for having me.
And who knows what the future holds for this bill? We'll certainly be keeping an eye on it, and we encourage you to do the same. It's definitely a topic that sparks debate, and staying informed is crucial.
Absolutely crucial.
All right, that's it for today. Until next time.